In a remote corner of the Tibetan Plateau, surrounded by some of the world's tallest mountains and deepest gorges, China is planning the world's most complicated super dam. And it's the biggest hydroelectric project we've ever seen on MegaBuilds. The dam could give China enough clean electricity to power the UK for an entire year. But the ideal location is one of the most inaccessible gorges in Tibet. A project this size could change the geopolitical power balance across South Asia, if the earthquakes don't get in the way, that is. Hey, I'm Regis, and for this special episode, we dive really deep into China's insane plan to build the world's most powerful dam. China loves engineering. For the past 70 years, they've broken records in almost every industry, building more and bigger than most of the competition, and hydropower is no exception. China currently has about 87,000 dams, according to some reports. That's because with a population of 1.4 billion people, water management is crucial. Not only that, but they've redirected many of their major rivers in an attempt to supercharge development. We've actually got a whole other video on that insane project, so we won't get into it here, but suffice it to say that China is no stranger to hydro megaprojects. But compared to what they're working on now, everything else pales in comparison, even the Three Gorges Dam. And there have been some crazy plans to realize this project.
And one of the original ways they said they were going to do it was to use a nuclear weapon to blow up that dam. Someone suggested it. Thank goodness the Chinese government were like, nah, we're not doing that. So it's kind of like this thing where it's the most amazing potential for hydropower on the planet, but it's really tricky to extract that power.
This is Dr. Ruth Gamble, an expert on the environmental, cultural, and climate history of Tibet, the Himalayas, and Asia as a whole. She helped us a lot in our research to uncover more details about China's megadam.
Hi, my name's Ruth Gamble. I'm a senior lecturer at La Trobe University in Melbourne, Australia. And I've been writing an environmental history of the Yarlung Tsangpo River, which is the upper reaches of the Brahmaputra.
Well, and this river is where China is planning to develop a 60-gigawatt super dam capable of producing 3 times as much electricity as the biggest dam in the world today. If completed, this project would harness the natural power of one of the biggest rivers in Asia and produce enough clean electricity for tens of millions of people. Pulling it off would be an engineering triumph, even for China, and not just because of its size. The dam's supposed to be built here, in a remote and wild part of China that few foreigners ever visit. The mountainous area is prone to natural disasters, and even getting the construction materials up there would be something worth celebrating. China's neighbors India and Bangladesh share the same river that China wants to build on, and they're worried that a project of this size might seriously affect their access to water, particularly in light of climate change and increasingly unpredictable water flow. With all this to think about, it's crazy that China's even considering this, to be honest. So before we look at how they might actually pull it off, let's try and understand why. Basically, China needs a lot of electricity. Twice as much as the USA and 8 times as much as Russia. At the moment, the majority of Chinese electricity is generated by burning coal, but that's pretty much the dirtiest way to do it possible. Coal produces way more emissions than the alternatives, especially hydropower. So as China moves towards net zero and their demand for electricity keeps rising, the idea is to use more renewable sources of energy to produce electricity. As a result, China is investing in everything from solar panels and wind turbines to tidal power and hydroelectric dams. In fact, since the 1950s, China has built tens of thousands of dams, including the biggest and most powerful hydroelectric facility in the world, the Three Gorges Dam. And now, after damming most of their internal rivers, China has turned their attention to their major international rivers, and there are a lot. That's because China basically controls most of the water in Asia, and all because of this, the Tibetan Plateau. With an average altitude of over 4,500 meters, it towers above Asia and covers an area 5 times larger than France. This insane altitude means that it's filled with glaciers and ice, so much so that it's nicknamed the Earth's third pole. And as all that ice melts, it forms many of the biggest and most important rivers in the region. Rivers like the Indus, the Ganges, the Mekong, and the Yarlung Tsangpo. In fact, the plateau provides so much water for the region that it's also known as the Water Tower of Asia.
So there was this idea that this one mountain in Western Tibet was the center of the universe, and then the 4 rivers flowed out from it. So these rivers aren't just a place where people live, they're also the sites of the largest agricultural regions in all the countries they go through, whether it's Pakistan, India, Southeast Asia, or China, right? So if you think about the food bowls of China, India, Pakistan, Southeast Asia are all along these rivers. If you're going to be an alien that invaded Earth, you'd want to take over control of the Tibetan Plateau because you'd be in charge of all of the water of half the world's population really fast.
Okay, so these rivers are definitely very important, and to China, they could provide not only an enormous source of renewable energy, but geopolitical power over their downstream neighbors. We'll come back to that later, but for now, let's take a look at the exact river that China's targeting. This is the Yarlung Tsangpo. Depending on which country it's flowing through, it's also known as the Siang and the Brahmaputra. And thanks to the insane amount of white water and waterfalls it contains, many call it the Everest of rivers. To keep things simple though, we'll just stick with the Yarlung Tsangpo. It starts here at the Angsi Glacier and flows over 1,000 kilometers east until it reaches Namcha Barwa Mountain. From there, it turns south and runs into India and Bangladesh, before finally emptying into the Indian Ocean. This river is incredible. It's the highest major river in the world, and at almost 3,000 kilometers long, it's also one of the longest. As far as we know, no one has ever traveled its entire length, and it's easy to see why.
This area of Medo is where they're going to build the dam is right next to the Indian border, and it's really isolated, right? It took ages even for the British to figure out where the river actually flowed through that region. It's one of the most isolated places.
The exact location that China is targeting for the dam is here. It's called the Yarlung Tsangpo Gorge, a sacred place in Tibetan culture, which is even said to contain a hidden entrance to the spirit world.
You have different ethnic groups living within the gorge. At the north, you have the Tibetans, and at the south, you have the Adi people. And then in between, you have the Pemakopa, is a different group. And the Tibetans have this idea that a goddess's head rests on the Tibetan plateau, and her body curves around the river's bends, and her feet end up on the Assamese plains. So they consider that entire stretch of the river to be not just a sacred site, but an embodied goddess.
However, China is not interested in this place because of its spiritual significance, but rather because of its unique geography, which makes it the perfect location for a massive hydropower megaproject. That's because the river descends rapidly as it passes through the gorge. Here, as it curves round the 7.7 kilometer tall Namcha Barwa mountain in a huge arc known as the Great Bend, it drops more than 2,000 meters in altitude. For comparison, the Grand Canyon is only 1,857 meters at its deepest point, making the Yarlung Tsangpo Gorge 3 times deeper from riverbed to mountain peak.
So this is one of the steepest descents of a river on the planet, probably the steepest descent. The river begins at over 3,000 meters, and within 100 kilometers, it has descended to 600 meters, right? So there's one of the steepest descents on the planet.
It's a giant natural wonder, buried deep in one of the most remote and inaccessible parts of the world. And since it's so hard to get there, scientists are still discovering new species in this region every year.
They're still finding new mammals that no one's ever seen before through camera traps in this region. I mean, that's extraordinary in 2024 to find new mammals, right? So it's an amazing place biologically as well. So they have to figure out a way to extract the hydropower without trashing the biodiversity.
And this is where China is planning to build their super dam. Sound crazy? Well, it really is. Before we take an exact look at the crazy dam that China's planning on building, we quickly want to thank this video's partner, CyberGhost VPN. When visiting places such as China, India, or pretty much any country in the world, you've probably already experienced content being geo-blocked. Luckily, there's a solution. And this is where we introduce today's sponsor, CyberGhost VPN. With CyberGhost VPN, all of your traffic goes through a secure VPN tunnel. Your IP address is hidden and your data is encrypted. Thanks to CyberGhost, you can access all kinds of geo-restricted content, YouTube included. Simply change your online location and you can find better deals online, play games blocked in your region, and even access blocked libraries of over 40 streaming services like Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Disney+. What's even more important is that CyberGhost VPN protects you against hackers and data brokers that want to sell your information online. CyberGhost's 38 million worldwide users have made it one of the most highly recommended VPN on Trustpilot. Over 21,000 people have rated it with a rating of 4.3 stars. CyberGhost VPN is available for all platforms: Windows, Mac OS, Android, iOS, and many others. And one subscription can be used for 7 devices, so you can even share it with your family and friends. With our link, cyberghostvpn.com/megabuilds, you get their best deal ever. Just $2.03 a month, plus 4 months free, which is 84% off. There's even a 45-day money-back guarantee, so you literally have nothing to lose. It's a great product, we recommend it, and by signing up using our link in the description, you also help us to create higher quality videos like this one. Thank you again to CyberGhost VPN for sponsoring this video, and now, back to the dam. The area of China's super dam is so remote that there wasn't even a major road here all year round until 2013. But the potential hydropower resources are just too huge for the Chinese government to pass up. Despite its mountainous surroundings, China's been developing hydropower on the Yarlung Tsangpo for a while. As things stand, there are several other hydropower facilities further upstream at Dagu, Jieshu, and Jiachaun, but they're nothing compared to the 60 gigawatt super dam. Details about the actual plans are very vague. Either the government doesn't know exactly how they're going to pull it off yet, or they don't want anyone else to know.
So there's basically 2 ways they could do it, and both of them have problems. One of them is to build another cascade of dams down through the Great Gorge, and that's really problematic because this is a biodiverse region and that would really trash the place. And then the second way is to dig a tunnel from the highest reach of the river to the bottom reach of the river and release the water through the tunnel, and then you create a lot of power coming out right, but that would mean the water comes out right near the Indian border. So either way, it's tricky.
And this second option seems to be the most likely one so far. In some cases like this one, it just makes more sense to build a hydropower station that uses the natural flow of the water, rather than backing it all up. It's called a run-of-the-river system, and it's actually pretty common, with major examples everywhere from Brazil to the United States, and China, of course. Instead of creating a reservoir, the water is simply redirected from a high point on the river to a lower point. Along the way, it's forced through a power station, spinning turbines as it passes through and creating electricity. Now, the principle is nothing new, but putting it all into practice at the Yarlung Tsangpo Gorge is a completely different story. The idea would be to bore a tunnel all the way through the Namcha Barwa mountain, cutting the Great Bend straight across. Water would pour down through the tunnel, emerging downstream after dropping thousands of meters in altitude and passing through a power station. Well, not just a power station. Some reports say that there would actually be a series of 9 separate hydroelectric facilities at the bottom of the tunnel. Water would pass from one to the other as it moves downstream, generating electricity at each one separately. We took a look at the maps, and as far as we can tell, even if the tunnel cut through the bend at its shortest point, it would still be 40 kilometers long. Another potential route may be one that appears on the ABC website. They show a tunnel running between the towns of Pei and Mudog, which we calculate to be about 50 kilometers long. That's the same length as the Channel Tunnel, connecting the UK to mainland Europe. Something like that might make more sense than the shortest possible route if it meant better access to goods and services at each end. Either way, experts say a tunnel like this could carry 2,000 cubic meters of water every second, meaning the project could produce up to 300 billion kilowatt hours of electricity per year. To put that in perspective, the Three Gorges Dam only generates 100 billion. But in terms of visible construction, this megadam would actually look much smaller than the Three Gorges Dam.
So this is the thing with this project. The mega in the mega project is hopefully more about the power of the water coming down the mountains than the size of the project they're going to build. Yeah, the point of the Three Gorges Dam is its sheer size creates the kinetic energy or the gravitational potential energy for the water falling off the side of it to turn turbines. In this space, you have nature's created a mega project. The gorge itself is like nothing else on the planet. So it's not so much having to build something massive as to exploit the power that's already there. So you wouldn't need as much of a bigger dam to create the power, to extract the power from that space.
But this definitely doesn't diminish the insane challenges of this mega project. Some experts say that this would be the riskiest, most complicated, and most expensive project undertaken on any river, anywhere, ever. And they're not just talking about how remote the region is, it's also prone to massive earthquakes. The Yarlung Tsangpo Gorge sits on something called the Indo-Tsangpo Suture Zone, which is basically the result of India colliding with Asia over 50 million years ago. The two tectonic plates that smashed together when the landmasses met are still rubbing up against each other, and this causes a lot of seismic activity. In 1950, the region experienced one of the most severe earthquakes ever recorded. Measuring 8.6 on the Richter scale, the tremors were felt as far away as Calcutta, and water disturbances were registered in England and Norway. The earthquake killed over 700 people in the sparsely populated region and caused landslides which blocked the Yarlung Tsangpo for 8 days. When the natural dam finally broke, it created a 7-meter high wave that killed over 500 people. And the crazy thing is that similar earthquakes have been registered multiple times throughout the 20th century. If that happens after the dam has been built, the downstream consequences could genuinely be catastrophic.
So it's not if, but when there's going to be another major earthquake in that region.
And it's not just the earthquakes either. Landslides are also very common. In the last 20 years, the Yarlung Tsangpo has been blocked several times by natural debris, including in March 21, when a melting glacier fell 4 kilometers into the river, just upstream from the Great Bend. The resulting backlog could be seen by satellites. And that was nowhere close to the only incident.
And the example I would use again is this glacial lake outburst flood leading to a dam collapsing and killing at least 100 people in Sikkim last November. And that was a tiny dam. Yeah, it was a tiny dam and it did that much damage. So if you've got one that's a bigger dam on that bigger scale and something goes wrong with it, it's like a really bad outcome. And the other thing is too that it's right next to the border, so it wouldn't just be a devastating event for the people who live downstream, but it'd also be an international geopolitical incident, bringing in two countries that don't have a resolved border.
Seeing these images really brings home how powerful nature can be, and just how crazy this project really is. The scale of it all is honestly mind-blowing. And while there's no official confirmation on exactly what's gonna happen, there are several signs that the government is serious about this project. This map of hydro development sites, produced by a Chinese company 20 years ago, identifies the enormous potential at the Great Bend. And more recently, government planning documents announced development on the lower reaches of the river.
The fact that this was put into the Chinese national plan, right, the 5-year plan, suggests that they're trying to, it's a big deal. It's not just another dam that you're going to build, right? It's a big deal to try and extract this energy from the lower Yarlung Tsangpo. So it suggests they're trying to do something super techy. Like the next thing that they had after saying they were going to exploit the power of the lower Yarlung Tsangpo was go to the moon.
Apart from the 5-year plan, the project was also publicly discussed by Yan Zhihong, chairman of Power China, the company reportedly in charge of construction. According to the Global Times, he confirmed that the project would produce 300 billion kilowatts per hour of electricity per year, and play a significant role in China's net zero goals. As far as we can tell, work seems pretty sure to go ahead, which is why China's downstream neighbors are preparing themselves. If the flow of the Yarlung Tsangpo is disrupted, it could have serious effects on the lives of millions of people in India and Bangladesh.
People keep thinking about dams as being things that hold back water, but it's not just water that they hold back, they also hold back sediment. And most of Bangladesh, well, all of Bangladesh pretty much, is formed by sediment that has descended down from the Himalaya, right? So if you're holding back sediment, it means that the people who are farming in Assam and Bangladesh don't get the same fertilizing soil descending on their fields every monsoonal season as they have for like millennia. All right, so all of those places are incredibly fertile because of the mudslide that comes down the hill every year during the monsoon. So that's one thing. It decreases fertility in the soil because there's no sediment getting down the hill, or less sediment. So this is why I was saying if the Chinese government has figured out, or the Chinese scientists have figured out a way to let sediment through more, that this would have less of an effect.
So this hydropower station could seriously alter day-to-day water flow downstream. Indian and Bangladeshi farmers who depend on the river could experience water shortages and flooding as a result of the dam. For them, climate change is already making water management increasingly difficult, and the added complications of China's super dam might cause huge problems for food production. In an attempt to mitigate the effects of the super dam, India has announced their own project. They plan to build a 10-gigawatt dam that would help them store and control their own water resources. This could be good for India, but might make the situation even more complicated for Bangladesh at the bottom of the river. And this all speaks to the bigger problem underlying everything: geopolitics. If one country controls the flow of water to another, they hold a huge amount of power. Water could potentially be used as a strategic weapon by upstream neighbors to exert influence over those downstream. For China and India, that's a major cause for concern. The two countries already have a difficult relationship, thanks to border disputes and competition for resources and political influence.
郑重要求印方切实按照有关精神，严格约束一线部队，不得挑衅滋事。
In 2020, tensions got so high on the border that the two armies clashed, resulting in the deaths of 20 Indian soldiers. We're not saying that China's super dam is going to lead to war, but it's likely to strain an already delicate relationship. And as the climate heats up, water is sure to be a new focal point for strategic competition.
So I think that might be part of what they're trying to do, is find a way to extract water without annoying India, without destroying the environment. And then that really would be a technological feat equal to getting to the moon and Mars.
The future of the relationship between India and China is just one of the many questions surrounding this megaproject. As the biggest electricity consumer in the world, China has an obligation to focus on renewable sources of power, but their neighbors also have a right to use the river that's fed them for centuries. We don't know when exactly construction might start or even how much it'll all cost, but the fact that China's even considering this is kind of crazy. But that being said, China's kind of known for building what other countries can't, and if anyone can pull this off, it's probably them. So the only question left is, what do you think? Will they actually manage it? And what will the consequences be for India and Bangladesh? This is one that we're going to keep a close eye on, so make sure to subscribe to stay updated. We'll let you know if anything gets moving on this. And if you want to try CyberGhost VPN, make sure to use our link in the description. CyberGhost VPN will protect your data while you browse and give you full access to blocked content on the internet. It's a great VPN, and their current deal for $2.03 a month and 45 days money-back guarantee is a great deal, so it's totally risk-free. Thank you for watching this special episode, and as always, we'll see you in the next video.